What's up, folks? Welcome back to Tactical Tortoise. My name is Trevi, and it's an exciting time for Warhammer 40k because the 10th edition of the game is finally out. And just this weekend, we already saw some large events already taking place. Events have been a little scarce over the last few weeks as people prepare for 10th edition to make the transition over from 9th. And just this weekend, we saw a multitude of 5-round events go down. So what we're going to be doing today is breaking down the top undefeated lists from those events, talking about what's in them, and lists that you should be aware of moving on into the future of the edition. As always, if you enjoy my Warhammer 40k content, go ahead and like the video, subscribe to the channel, all the YouTube stuff, and let's dive right in. So the first is the Confluence of Chaos. This was a relatively small event, only 17 players, and had a little bit of a house rule on true line of sight, just ensuring that players don't use protruding parts like antenna, arms, or weapons to trace their line of sight to and from their models. Other than that, relatively standard 10th edition 40k affair with preset missions. This event was won by Kyle Wright, playing Iron Hands in a Gladius task force. The army was led by an apothecary Biologus with Bolter Discipline, granting him sustained 1 on his unit, and if under the effects of Devastator Doctrine, whether from the Doctrine proper or granted Devastator Doctrine thanks to Adaptive Strategy, the stratagem allows you to change the active doctrine for a single unit in the Gladius Task Force detachment, that would give critical hits on hit rolls of 5. This is an amazing combo for units that grant that lethal hits ability because you get lethal and sustain on a 5+ at that point. And we have a couple of huge Gravis units for this character to join. On top of that, we also have Iron Father Fieros. He's going to be able to buff the vehicles in the list and potentially can also grant a 5+ Feel No Pain to a Gravis armored unit. However, he cannot join alongside the Apothecary Biologus. The Apothecary can only join alongside a captain, and Fieros is unfortunately not a captain. So you can't take both of them in the same unit. That would be a very strong combo. You have to look for a Gravis captain if you want to combo off on the Apothecary's ability. We also have a captain in Terminator armor with Artificer armor, granting him a 5+ Feel No Pain. Now, what are the units these are leading? We had 5 heavy intercessors and 10 heavy intercessors, both with their heavy bolt rifles and heavy bolter. We also had an Eradicator squad that the Apothecary could join, so we had a little bit of optionality there. Either he could hop into the Eradicator squad to give that critical and sustain to their Melta attacks, which is great, or he can jump into the big 10 model heavy intercessor squad to use those abilities on a high volume unit. So this gives us a little bit of an interesting piece of technology where this Apothecary can actually slot into whichever unit he wants. So if you're up against hordes, he can buff the unit with a bunch of bolt gun shots, or if you're up against heavy vehicles, you can buff the unit with all the Melta shots. You can really take your pick. And Fieros can go into whichever one you want to keep alive, either using the heavy intercessors to stay on objectives with their high OC value and that 5+ Feel No Pain granted by him, or protecting the Eradicators from return fire shooting. Fieros is also going to be there buffing up the Land Raider Redeemer, as well as 2 Repulsor Executioners to round out the armored contingent of the list. A ton of huge high toughness vehicles. The Land Raider Redeemer is particularly impressive because it has an incredible overwatch with its 2 huge 2-damage torrent weapon. In addition, we have a Terminator Assault Squad for that captain to join and give reroll charges to. Not much else to say there, just some Thunderhammers and Storm Shields to beat people up. With Honor of the Chapter, you can grant them the Lance keyword and +1 EP on the charge. They actually have a pretty good chance of blowing up vehicles if they do make their charge out of Deep Strike. And with their Teleport Homer, you can use Rapid Ingress for free, allowing you to save a little bit of additional CP and getting that unit on the table in an excellent place to get an easier charge. Overall, a super interesting list, and it's very cool to see the different varieties of Gravis armored units on the table and the different characters able to slot into them to dramatically change their focus in the battle formation section of each game. One thing that Space Marines don't typically do very well is controlling their opponent's CP economy, but Kyle Wright did include a Calidus Assassin as an Imperial agent in this list to do just that. With its Reign of Confusion, the Calidus Assassin can increase the cost of a stratagem when it's used on all future uses by 1. And as we've learned in the rules commentary section, this even increases the cost of stratagems used for free. So with some of the other characters that we're going to be talking about later on in this video, or even the captain with his Rights of Battle that is included in Kyle's own list, a stratagem used for 0 command points would still add that cost added onto it after the fact, given how important free stratagems are in 40k, and especially stratagems that you use every turn that you want to continuously be spamming with that free stratagem ability. The Calidus Assassin can really destroy some game plans. There's a lot of factions that are reliant on models with Gilliman style effect that allows you to use multiple free stratagems every turn, and the Calidus Assassin mucking with that can really change the game. On top of that, it's also a deep striking, infiltrating lone operative, which actually makes the Calidus Assassin incredibly good at just holding down objectives. If your opponent doesn't have deep strikers or outflankers, you can just put the Calidus on your backline objective or a flank that you don't really want to go through and let the big, slow Gravis bricks move up to the center of the table while not even having to worry about that backline objective getting shot off. There are very few ways to interact with these lone operative models, so I think we're going to be seeing them pretty commonly moving on into the future. So congratulations to Kyle for taking down that event, and that moves us on to the self-proclaimed Polish Singles Championships. This is a 30-player event and had very few house rules, just a minor clarification about hull measurement. That hull measurement would be used as in past editions, so even units with tiny flight stands and a huge hull would still be used for hull measurement, which I think is the intention of the rules commentary rule, but not really clarified that well. Need a little bit of an update on that one. This was won at 5-0 by Wiktor Schmidt, who played Aeldari for the event. This is a pretty interesting list, eschewing almost all enhancements and focusing almost entirely on combat and utility units. It did have a Death Jester in the list with the Weeping Stone, so every time he would kill a unit, you would gain a Fate dice, but no other enhancement. We had Azurmen in a big unit of Dire Avengers to buff them with their free supercharged Overwatch that hits on 4s if they're on an objective. A Farseer with a unit of Guardian Defenders. Not sure what weapon was on them, but I imagine it was probably a Bright Lance. One Autarch Wayleaper to give some command point generation, alongside 5 Rangers, 3 individual D-Cannon support weapon platforms, 2 units of Warp Spiders, 5 apiece in those, 3 Fire Prisms, a Night Spinner, and a Wraith Knight with 2 heavy Wraith Cannons. No melee, all shooting for this guy. Now this list has an excellent balance between its utility units and its offense. Obviously, the Wraith Knight and the D-Cannons alongside that Night Spinner are going to be putting a ton of pressure on your opponent. With the Wraith Knight with the Towering keyword, getting easy lines of sight into the opponent's deployment zone, the D-Cannons firing an indirect fire, and the Night Spinner able to target just about anything on the table with its long range indirect fire. You're able to put a lot of pressure on your opponent, and then you have units like the Warp Spiders and Rangers that either have Infiltrate and a reactive move in the place of the Rangers, or just a basically infinite movement in the place of the Warp Spiders, which gives you an incredible flexibility if you're trying to score tactical objectives. Backing that up is the incredibly efficient Eldar firepower, 3 Fire Prisms, so as soon as your opponent breaks cover to try to deal with these indirect fire beat sticks that are hammering them down, you're going to have those huge 6 damage shots with essentially full rerolls to just clip them out, or the 2 damage blast attacks from the Night Spinner as well, all of which do massive damage to enemies within line of sight. It is interesting not to see Eldrad in this list or any other way to manipulate Fate dice. It doesn't look like Wiktor is focusing on Fate dice manipulation for his build. He's mostly just going to be using the raw efficiency of Eldar units to take down the event, which he did at 5-0. Moving on, we had Hellstorm Wargaming's All-Stars Heat 3, which did use 10th edition, but I couldn't find their event packet for 10th edition on their website. Fortunately, the event packet is still a 9th edition version, so I don't know if they used any particular house rules or missions for this event. This one was won by Josh Roberts running Imperial Knights. This was a pretty balanced list that took a mix of the large Imperial Knights alongside Armigers to support them. The Armigers are incredibly efficient and good at grabbing objectives, but obviously not the absolute powerhouses that the big knights are, and don't get the benefit of that towering keyword. The list was led by a Knight Warden, upgraded with Mythic Hero, so he was able to order 2 Armigers with Bondsman abilities every turn, and the Warden granting them -1 damage. As long as he was Bondsmaning at least 1 Armiger, he would also gain that ability himself. Getting a -1 damage effect on a big knight like that is a huge deal. We had a Knight Crusader with the banner of Macarius Triumphant, giving him an objective secured ability, so if he holds the objective at the start of a turn, it locks into the Knight player's control until the enemy comes and takes it at the end of another turn. And then, pretty simple remainder of the list, Canis Rex and 5 Armiger Warglaves. The list is already pretty effective at close range combat thanks to all of those Armiger Warglaves with their Melta spears and pretty decent melee attacks, and the Warden backs that up, making multiple of those Armigers more difficult to kill. The Crusader is an excellent fire platform, and Canis Rex can do a little bit of both. Not to mention, he also grants you that free stratagem every turn to use on him, so he is incredibly efficient and difficult to take down, since he's basically permanently going to be ion shielded. The inclusion of Canis Rex does lower the model count of the army quite a bit, but with the power of those big knights, I don't think that is really hurting it, and clearly not too much for Josh Roberts because he was able to go 5 5-0 and win the event. Now, we're going to see a little bit of a similar theme moving on to the last event that we have to talk about today, because this is the Boise Cup. The Boise Cup was a 51-player event and was won by Adam Holland playing, again, Imperial Knights. 50% of the large events this weekend were won by Imperial Knights. Way to go! Big stompy robots. This list is fairly similar to Josh Roberts' list with a couple notable exceptions. It also includes a Knight Crusader and a Knight Warden, but we are doubling down on the tankiness of the Knight Warden by taking Unyielding Paragon. This reduces incoming armor penetration characteristics of weapons targeting the Warden, effectively giving him a built-in Armor of Contempt effect and making him significantly harder to kill, alongside that -1 damage as long as his Bondsman ability is active. The Knight Crusader also has Mythic Hero, allowing him to give his Bondsman ability to 2 Armigers every turn. He grants +1 to hit with ranged attacks. No Canis Rex in this list, unlike the last one, but his place has been taken by a Vindicare Assassin. And like we talked about in the first list with the Calidus Assassin, the usefulness of a lone operative model that can sit in the back of your army and hold down objectives, threaten characters, and just continue to plow a huge damage sniper rifle shot into something important every round is super impactful. Again, if your opponent doesn't have ways to drop in on it or outflank onto that Vindicare to try to kill it, these things are just going to sit in the back of your table edge forever and hold down objectives, screen out enemy drops, and is probably the reason that we don't see the Banner of Macarius Triumphant in this particular list, because you don't need it as long as you have that Vindicare sitting on your back objective. Otherwise, the list is focused basically entirely on Armigers, just like the one was previously. We have 5 Armiger Warglaives, just like Josh Roberts' list, but we are also making up the points for that Canis Rex with 2 Armiger Helverins. These guys are going to sit next to the Crusader every turn, be granted +1 to hit thanks to Mythic Hero, able to target both of them, so they're all hitting on 2s, the Crusader and the 2 Armigers, and alongside the Rapid Fire Battle Cannon, this is able to put an enormous amount of fire, just a weight of shots downrange. Then, of course, you have the Warden and 5 Armiger Warglaives to push up the table and take the midboard, and a Vindicare Assassin just for some additional support. And it's not really a wonder that Adam was able to go 5-0 with this list. So congratulations to all of the winners of these GTs. Let me know down in the comment section what you think about these lists, and if you are playing in a competitive event in the future, what faction you're playing and what style of list you are intending to take. I'm super excited to see how the competitive metagame for 10th edition racks up. I think it's going to be an exciting time, at least for the next couple of weeks. I know there are some real front runners, both in these results and that people have identified in the game so far, but obviously for the time being, we're going to have to develop some answers to them. Big thanks for watching all the way to the end of the video. Thanks as well to everybody who supports the channel, either over on Patreon at patreon.com/TacticalTortoise, YouTube channel members, and Twitch subscribers. All you people are great and I love you. Remember to keep it classy, folks, and have happy wargaming.